Hi everyone, dear students. Today let us take up pregnancy and embryonic development. First of all, let us define what is pregnancy. Pregnancy, which is also called as gestation, is the period of embryonic development from implantation to fully grown fetus inside the uterus. That is, from the implantation of the blastocyst until it grows into fully grown fetus inside the uterus. That period is called as the pregnancy or gestation. It is usually on an average 273 days, that is 9 months in humans. Let's see the gestation period in some of the other mammals. Like elephant has got the gestation period of 22 months, and in mouse it is just 19 days. Similarly, in cows it is 9 months around, more or less, that is 279 to 292 days. Then in cats it is 64 days, in dogs 2 months, that is 61 days, and in gorilla and chimpanzee it's of 8.5 months, 8.5 months, closer to humans, that is 230 to 250 days duration. Now let us look into this diagram which shows the uterus of human female with a developing embryo inside. Now we see here that the endometrium in a pregnant woman, the endometrium which is in between the myometrium and the placenta, that region is called as decidua basalis. And the endometrium which is surrounding the developing fetus, which has in the beginning embedded the blastocyst growing around it, and now it is found all around the coverings of the fetus, and that is called as the decidua capsularis. And the endometrium which is there on all the sides lining the remaining part of the uterus, that is called as decidua parietalis. Okay, and then this is the cavity of the uterus, cervix, and the cervical canal is blocked by a thick mucus, that is called as mucus plug. Then if you look at the other structures here, the chorionic villi forming the important part of the placenta from the fetal side, which is developing from the embryonic membrane, extra embryonic membrane called as chorion. So it is in the form of chorionic villi which help in absorbing the nutrients from the mother's blood. And that means there are extra embryonic membranes which are the amnion which is covering the fetus, and this amnion secretes a liquid that is called as amniotic fluid that surrounds the fetus, and this amniotic fluid protects the baby from the external shocks and pressures. It also maintains the normal equal temperature all around. Okay, then the next layer after the amnion, the outermost, is the chorion, which also forms the part of placenta, and then yolk sac Yolk sac in other animals like reptiles and birds play important role because it contains a lot of yolk, and that yolk or the nutritive substance is helpful providing the nutrients to the developing fetus. Okay, but in humans, yolk sac does not play any role in nutrition because placenta is there to supply all the nutrients and to remove the waste from the fetal blood. So the yolk sac is reduced as we see here, and this yolk sac plays another important role, that the blood cells develop from the yolk sac. The first blood islands containing the hematopoietic cells that appear in the yolk sac, and from there only the blood is derived in the fetal developmental stage. Okay, then the next extra embryonic membrane is the allantois, and that is also almost non-functional, but yolk sac and allantois also take part in forming a cord that is called as umbilical cord. Umbilical cord connects the fetus with the mother's uterus, or it forms the stalk of the placenta. Okay, and this connecting cord contains the blood vessels. They are called as the umbilical arteries and umbilical veins. Now let us look into the structure of placenta a little bit in detail. Now look at this diagram. The umbilical cord showing here, part of the umbilical cord is showing that there is one umbilical vein and two umbilical arteries. These two umbilical arteries actually arise from the fetus. They are arising from the heart. Therefore, they are called as the arteries, umbilical arteries, and reach the placenta. Human placenta is called as hemochorial placenta. Hemochorial placenta. Because we see that here the chorionic villi of the fetus, the placenta of the fetal side, chorionic villi, that is bathed or completely immersed in the mother's blood pool. That is, the chorionic villi are directly penetrating into the blood pool of the mother, and the epithelium of chorionic villi is in contact with the mother's blood pool. That helps in absorption of the nutrients from the mother's blood. Okay, the two umbilical arteries which enter into the placenta, they further divide into so many branches and they enter into the chorionic villi. And these umbilical arteries actually bring the carbon dioxide, that is the respiratory waste gas released by the fetus, and that gas, that carbon dioxide, is exchanged with oxygen from the mother's blood pool. Okay, and it also carries the umbilical arteries and their branches also carry urea, that is the nitrogenous waste, that is also diffusing into the mother's blood. So removal of the nitrogenous wastes. So placenta work like the kidneys, the lungs, and the digestive system of the fetus actually, because this is the only source for getting the nutrients and getting rid of the wastes during the embryonic development. Okay, now we see that the umbilical vein is formed in the chorionic villi, and it brings the nutrients, glucose, amino acids, minerals, vitamins, fatty acids, all those nutrients will be entering into the umbilical vein, and umbilical vein supplies the nutrients and oxygen to the fetus. So here we see that the arteries are carrying rather venous blood, that is deoxygenated blood, and the umbilical vein carries oxygenated blood, exactly opposite to what we see in normal human beings. So that is how the fetal blood circulation is working, connected with the placenta, and the mother's blood pool is fed by the uterine artery and its branches, and the blood when gets venous by collecting the carbon dioxide from the fetal blood and urea, it is then taken away by the mother's uterine vein, and the elimination of the nitrogenous waste and carbon dioxide is done by the mother's organs, like the carbon dioxide will be eliminated from the mother's lungs, and the nitrogenous waste will be filtered out in the kidney of the mother. So that is how the placenta plays very important role. Placenta also allows some of the antibodies, especially the antibody G, which are produced in the mother's blood, to enter into the fetal blood and protect the fetus from infections. And if the mother is infected, the viruses and the bacteria can also enter through the placenta and reach the fetus, but because antibodies are reaching to the fetal body, so they prevent the fetus from the infections or diseases. So that is how, if the mother is having the HIV infection or suffering from AIDS, fetus also will get it. Okay, now that's about the placenta. Placenta also serves as the endocrine gland, and it secretes different hormones which help in the maintaining of the pregnancy, as well as the growth and development of mammary glands and the complete development of the fetus. Okay, now let us take up further points. Now let's begin with when the embryo is developing inside the mother's womb. How you say that whether it is a male, it is going to become a male child or a female child, whether the girl will be taking birth or a boy will be taking birth. It is actually decided at the time of fertilization. We know that the sperms produced by the human male, they are of two types, one carrying X chromosome and another carrying Y chromosome. So therefore, the father is responsible for the determination of sex of the child. So it depends on which sperm is actually going and fertilizing the egg, because from the mother's side, if you take up, the egg contain only the X chromosome as the sex chromosome. So females are having only X as the X chromosome as the sex chromosome, but in males there are two types of the sex chromosome, X and Y. So therefore, male human beings are producing two types of sperms. One sperm carrying the X chromosome, another carrying the Y chromosome. If X chromosome carrying sperm fertilizes the egg, then we see that the combination of the sex chromosome will be XX, and that will result into the fetus developing into a girl child. And if the Y chromosome containing sperm fertilizes the egg, we see that XY will be the combination of the sex chromosomes, and the embryo will develop into a male child or boy. So remember that one. So therefore it is the father who is responsible for the sex of or sex determination of the child, whether the child is going to become girl or a boy. Mother is not responsible, because from mother all the time only one X chromosome is contributing. Is that clear? Okay. Now let us take up some more points about how the pregnancy proceed further and what are the developments taking place inside the uterus. So we see here that the trophoblast cells closer to the inner mass are known as cells of Roberts. Now recollect the knowledge or the idea you have about the blastocyst. You have seen in my previous lectures that blastocyst has got a single cell thick outer covering called as the trophoblast. We have learned that the blastocyst, when it gets embedded into the endometrium, that's called as implantation, and then the blastocyst starts developing. So what happens is the cells of Roberts which are there in the trophoblast towards the region where the inner cell mass is there, so these cells undergo cell division, they divide and give rise to trophoblastic villi, and these villi help in absorbing the nutrients from the endometrial tissue of the mother. So now the early embryo starts getting nutrients from the endometrium of the mother's uterus. Actually, the inner cell mass is consisting of stem cells, and that have got the potency to develop into complete fetus. So these stem cells undergo differentiation. First, what happens is a two-layered stage is developing when we have epiblast and hypoblast being developed. These two layers then get separated, that is called as the delamination, and some cells from the epiblast layer infiltrate by invagination or ingression processes, and they come into the space between the two layers, and that gets differentiated into the mesoderm. So hypoblast differentiates as the endoderm, epiblast changes into ectoderm. So now a three germinal layers stage, triploblastic stage, is reached, and that is called as the gastrula. Now with the diagram, let us know how this is happening actually. Now look at this diagram. It's a blastocyst, and these are the Roberts cells, inner cell mass, and this is trophoblast. Now what happens is the Roberts cells repeatedly go on dividing and adding more and more number of cells. So first we see that the cellular region of the trophoblast is formed here, and this further, as the number of the cells go on increasing, right, it forms a syncytial mass of the cells which are lost their cell membranes, only the cytoplasm and nuclei you see there, and this syncytial layer develops into syncytial trophoblastic villi, and these trophoblastic villi will help in absorbing the nutrients from the mother's endometrium. And here we see that the inner cell mass has differentiated into epiblast and hypoblast, and these two layers also give rise some cells which form the amnion above and yolk sac below. So the cells from the hypoblast, they produce the yolk sac, and amnion from the epiblast cells, continuation of the epiblast cells dorsally. Okay. Now these two layers actually forming the diploblastic stage of the embryo, and now this changes into triploblastic. Let us see what happens further. Now this diagram shows you that delamination is taking place. The epiblast and hypoblast have separated with a space in between. Okay, and now in this space, the cells from the epiblast start infiltrating. So they drop down from the layer of the epiblast cells. Some of the cells, they modify, they become teardrop shaped, and they drop down into the space, and that is called as the ingression of the cells. And similarly, other cells, they invaginate into this space, and that's called as invagination, going inside. Detailed studies are not there at this class 12 level, so just remember that the cells which are derived from the epiblast and they come to lie in between the two layers, that is in the space between the epiblast and hypoblast, those cells differentiate and they form the mesoderm. So the epiblasts now change into the ectoderm layer, and from the hypoblast layer we see that endoderm is formed. So this is the triploblastic stage, having 3 germinal layers, and these 3 germinal layers give rise to all the tissues and organs of the fetus. Now let us see what are the derivatives of germinal layers, because sometimes it has appeared in the previous entrance examination papers in MCQs. This concept of derivatives of germinal layers has been taken up for framing the question. So let's go through it quickly. Ectoderm is responsible for the outer coverings or outer layers of different parts of the body, like it forms the complete epidermis of the skin, and the complete nervous system is derived from the ectoderm. Brain and spinal cord and nerves, they are derived from the ectoderm only. Then skin glands, sweat glands, sebaceous glands, they are also developing from the ectoderm. Then mammary glands are also derived from the ectoderm. Hair are derived from the ectoderm. And lining of oral cavity, the half of the buccal cavity is also lined by the anterior half, we can say, lined by the ectoderm. And then anus and rectum are also lined by ectoderm. Apart from this, the enamel of teeth, enamel of our teeth also is derived from the ectoderm, and lens of eye lens and retina also are the derivatives of ectoderm. Okay, now let us take up mesoderm. Mesoderm gives rise to all the musculature, all the muscles in our body, they are derived from the mesoderm. And then all the connective tissues are also derived from the mesoderm. Cartilage, bones also are derived from the mesoderm. Mesoderm gives rise to important organs like heart, kidneys, gonads, and blood is also derived from the mesoderm. And dermis part of the skin is developing from mesoderm. Epidermis is developing from the ectoderm, dermis from the mesoderm. Then that is about the mesodermal territories, and then endodermal territories. Let us take up the lining of alimentary canal, the stomach, intestine and colon. All these are derived from the endoderm, and then lungs, liver and pancreas are also derived from the endoderm. Even the uterus and vagina, their inner linings are also derived from the endoderm. So these are the different derivatives of these three germinal layers in brief. Now let us go back to our further study on the pregnancy and embryonic development. So we have noted that the triploblastic stage is formed, that is called as the gastrula, and the process is called as gastrulation, and the further developments can be summarized as below here. The first organ to develop is the neural tube, which later on develops into the brain and spinal cord. So the first organ that forms by the infolding of the ectodermal layer, and that forms the neural tube, that is the stage called as neurula. And then on the 21st day of pregnancy, what we see is a tubular heart develops. Okay, and by the end of the first month of pregnancy, even the doctors can detect the heartbeat of the embryo. By 2 months of pregnancy, limbs and digits develop, and also a small tail is formed. By the end of first trimester, we say, that is first 3 months of the pregnancy are completed, that is the first trimester is over. So by that time we see that the embryo changes into fetus. We call it as now a fetus, and the organogenesis has already completed. Organogenesis means development of the organs. Now at this stage, the embryo that is now has become fetus is still a very tiny structure, and then placenta is also fully formed, and 4 extra embryonic membranes also are distinct or well developed at this time. Now what are these 4 extra embryonic membranes? We have already seen in the diagram. Amnion covers the fetus, secretes amniotic fluid that surrounds the fetus, and it protects the fetus from external pressures and shocks, and also allow free movements and regulate constant temperature around the fetus. Then the next extra embryonic membrane is the chorion, that takes part in the formation of fetal part of the placenta, that is chorionic villi, that helps in increasing the surface area for absorption of nutrients. Okay. Then chorion also remains as the outermost covering of the fetus, so it is outermost extra embryonic membrane. Then the other 2 extra embryonic membranes are the allantois and yolk sac. Allantois in other organisms like in reptiles and birds help in collecting the nitrogenous waste and excreta of the developing fetus. Okay, so the function is excretion there. But in humans, as because the nitrogenous wastes are also eliminated by the help of the placenta, so allantois has no significant function. It will form a part of the umbilical cord. Then yolk sac, which is also another important extra embryonic membrane in birds and reptiles, where it contains the yolk. It is completely filled with the yolk, and that yolk contains the nutrients, and these nutrients are taken up by the growing embryo, and before hatching, all the development of the embryo which are taking place there are by deriving the nutrients from the yolk sac, that is yolk only. But in humans, yolk sac does some other function, because in humans placenta is taking care of providing nutrients to the growing embryo. So the yolk sac produces the blood cells. The first blood islands containing the hemopoietic cells, they develop from the yolk sac. So it is the first hemopoietic organ of the fetus. Later on, this function will be taken up by the liver, and then after the childbirth, it will be taken up by the bone marrow. That is the red bone marrow. Okay. So yolk sac provides the blood cells. Then both allantois and the yolk sac, they together help in formation of umbilical cord. Okay. And that umbilical cord, as we know, connect the fetus with the placenta and help in transport of the nutrients and the wastes. By second trimester, that is completion of the second 3 months period, so total 6 months embryonic 6 months of pregnancy is completed now by the completion of second trimester. And let's see what are the developments we see after 6 months or during this time. By 5 months, hair grow on the scalp of the fetus, and fetus start moving. The fetal movements are clearly seen, and therefore the mother can feel the kicks of the baby inside her womb. Then by 6 months, that is by the end of trimester, we see that the eyelids of the fetus separate and eyelashes also are formed. Then by the end of the third trimester, now one more thing let me tell you, by the end of the second trimester itself, the baby has already developed the senses. The baby can even listen to the sounds, like the heartbeat of the mother and the sounds which are surrounding the mother's body. That also can be heard by the fetus, and all the sensory organs start functioning at this time. And the fetus also tries to catch hold of the umbilical cord and the movements of the hands and limbs. Continuously the baby will be showing movements of the limbs at this developmental stage. Then by the end of the third trimester, that is completion of 9 months, what all the developments have taken place, let us see. And this is the end of the gestation period. After completion of the 8 months, what we see is fetus turns upside down, and the fetus is fully grown up now, ready to take birth. And this upside down turning of the head, that is the fetus pointing the head towards the cervix and vagina, that is what called as vortex position. The vortex position is attained, and so that when the muscles of the uterus start contracting, the baby comes out with the head first. Head will be pushed out through the birth canal, and that is the vaginal delivery, safe delivery of the child. The fetus has attained full growth and ready to be delivered by this time. Okay. Now let us know about the placenta and its structure and function. Already we have discussed with the help of the diagram of the hemochorial placenta of the human beings. Let's now look into these points quickly. It is the organ formed by fetal and maternal tissues. Okay, it serves to supply the nutrients to the fetus and remove the waste from the fetus, and allows also the exchange of gases. It also helps as anchoring system, anchors the fetus to the wall of the uterus. And we know that the human placenta is hemochorial, and the chorionic villi are seen embedded into the mother's blood pool. Placenta also serves as endocrine gland. As I have told you, it secretes various hormones that helps in pregnancy and the growth and development of the fetus. For example, here, human chorionic gonadotropin, that is the first hormone detected in the urine of the pregnant woman, indicating that the woman is already pregnant. So it is produced during very early period of the pregnancy, and this human chorionic gonadotropin stimulates the ovary. So that is already the implantation has taken place now, pregnancy has begun. So the cells, endocrine cells from the endometrium, the region which is going to form the placenta later on, from there itself the human chorionic gonadotropin starts being secreted, and that actually controls the corpus luteum. Actually speaking, the complete placenta will be formed by the 3rd month. So by 3rd month, we see that the levels of human chorionic gonadotropin increase many-fold. Okay, so then this human chorionic gonadotropin will maintain the corpus luteum, and therefore the corpus luteum will be producing the progesterone in large quantities, and the pregnancy is maintained. Then human placental lactogen is another hormone. As the name lactogen refers to, the lacto refers to milk here, so that means it is helping in growth of mammary glands, enlargement of the mammary glands, enlargement of the areola and the nipple of the breasts, and also synthesis of milk. Then placental corticotropins. These will help in increasing the metabolism during pregnancy, so that the growth and development of the fetus and all the changes which are taking place are maintained and regulated properly, and energy is supplied. Okay. Then parturition and lactation. Let us take up what is the meaning of parturition and lactation now. Parturition is the process of delivery of the child. It's a process during which the fully formed fetus is expelled out through the birth canal, that is through the cervix and vagina of the mother. So that process is called as the parturition, or simply the childbirth. Now how it takes place? It is influenced by the fully grown fetus and placenta through mild contractions in the wall of the uterus, and that is what called as fetal ejection reflex. That's very important. When fetal ejection reflex occurs, it stimulates the brain centers and then the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland, mainly the posterior lobe of the pituitary, which releases the oxytocin in large quantities. Okay. Oxytocin, as we know, is the hormone which brings about the contractions in the smooth muscles of the uterus. So oxytocin along with the prostaglandins produced from the placenta cause vigorous contractions in the myometrium of the uterus, and that results into pushing the fetus down the cervix and vagina. Further, the relaxin hormone, which is produced from the corpus luteum of the pregnant woman, so this relaxin loosens the pubic symphysis, relaxes the muscles in the cervix and vagina, so thereby widening, making the birth canal wide or broader so that the fetus can pass through. And by loosening of the pubic symphysis, the pubic bones of the pelvic girdle move slightly away from each other so that the birth canal, the diameter of the birth canal increases. And thus the fetus is delivered out. After a few minutes of the parturition or delivery of the child, the placenta is also expelled out as after birth. Okay? The newborn baby is separated by cutting the umbilical cord. It is ligated on two sides, and in between with a scissor it is cut to see that there is no blood loss. So in this way the newborn baby is separated from the umbilical cord and the placenta. Then lactation. Lactation is the production of milk by mother's breast after parturition. As the baby suckles the mother's nipple, what happens is a reflex action is created, and that reflex action makes the release of oxytocin and also the prolactin in large quantities. So oxytocin helps as the milk let down hormone, so it helps in letting down the milk. So milk is released out through the ducts of the mammary glands, and the newborn baby start feeding on the milk. So the milk produced for first few days, which is rich in antibodies and lot of proteins like albumin, carbohydrates, minerals, vitamins. It's very rich in all the nutrients, and especially rich in the antibodies, which are nothing but the one type of antibody, IgA, immunoglobulin A. So we know that antibodies are immunoglobulins. So that immunoglobulin A will be coming into the mother's milk, and this milk is called as colostrum. And this colostrum is very, very essential, very, very important for the newborn baby, because it provides all the necessary nutrients, and more important is that now the baby is outside the mother's body, exposed to the environment, so it gives the protection against the diseases, protection against the infections. So that is how one kind of it is called as the passive immunity that is provided by the colostrum, because it is rich in immunoglobulin A. Okay, so that's all about the topic on the pregnancy in early developments of the embryo, and then the parturition and lactation. With this, dear students, we have completed the unit on reproduction. So keep watching these videos and prepare well. We'll be having test on the first unit. Okay, bye bye.